Hey all, I wanted to ramble a little bit about my feelings on the Allied Collective DLC for Risk of Rain 2. I've written a more generalized review on Medium if you want to simply know whether or not to buy the DLC. The answer is, yeah, probably, but this video is going to be talking a bit more in-depth about my stance on where the game is and where it's possibly going in the future. The bottom line is that the DLC expansion is just okay. I'm personally teetering on the side of just giving up on these DLCs being any good. I'll clarify by saying that I have just under 1,200 hours in this game, and most of that has been spent playing on Monsoon. Before the DLC released, I was about 75% of the way to the Golden Eclipse 8 badge, though I'm not the biggest fan of Eclipse. Because of the balancing differences between Monsoon and Eclipse, my opinions will likely differ from those who've hardcore dedicated themselves to the game's hardest difficulty. Let's start off with what I like about the new DLC. The new maps added are all fantastic and look gorgeous, even though I find the design of the Solus computer maps to clash with the game's art style. Aside from those, the artists that Gearbox has on staff are incredible and I think actually elevate the art direction of the original team. All of Gearbox's maps, even in Seekers of the Storm, are stunning and above the quality of what Hopu Games was producing. The new characters are really interesting and pretty well put together, but Drifter is kind of a balancing nightmare. I have a screenshot of my first run playing Drifter where I had 40 items sitting in my inventory after killing the first teleporter boss. So my initial glimpse of Drifter's strategy is simply to leave temporary items on the ground until you actually need them, because then you can stack up an insane amount of them. Beyond that, Drifter is a pretty good survivor. Operator, on the other hand, is perhaps one of the most skill-expressive and dynamic characters added to this game. Knowing when and how to use your abilities in correlation to the drones you have selected is annoying at the start, but gets pretty interesting when you figure out how to efficiently use Operator's kit. His default ability allowing you to hop between drones is really satisfying, and he has some really cool setups to pump out a ton of damage. Just a fantastic character. Beyond that, I have a lot of complaints. I understand the notion that they didn't give the Survivors of the Void or Seekers of the Storm survivors new skins because they don't want codependence across DLCs. But I think this issue could have been fixed in a pretty simple way. Instead of showing the locked icon for the new skin, simply hide it from the GUI. Boom. Problem solved. Players who have the DLC can get more skins for the DLC survivors they love, and players who don't have the DLC don't know what they're missing out on. And say if we really can't do this because we can never rectify the Steam achievements, why didn't the Allied Collective survivors get skins for the Allied Collective DLC? It's the same thing for the Seekers of the Storm survivors who didn't get skins for defeating the False Sun. It comes off as lazy more than considerate to the player. On the tangible gameplay side, I'm disappointed that Allied Collective's new bosses are stuck behind a new alternate path, much like the False Sun. There's no interesting mechanisms for exploring the new content. You simply need to activate an access node that always spawns on stage 3, and then go through the virtual portal at the teleporter. I'm not quite sure how you would otherwise fit this content into the current structure of Risk of Rain 2, but the game is already bloated with Halcyonite shrines that give an abundance of items, and now a guaranteed mountain shrine that drops even more items for the player. The Solus Wing fight is interesting in its initial encounter, but its static design makes the fight's replayability almost non-existent. You're going to see it from the background footage, but the most optimal way to fight this boss is to stick to a ramp and simply move up and down it while chipping away at its cores. The different attacks, like the laser beam and laser array, don't activate until the boss reaches certain health thresholds, so the best strategy is to try and break the cores all at the same time and then burst down the coolant and heat reactors to remove the boss's armor. But really, the Solus Wing's other attacks aren't interesting to begin with. The laser array can be troublesome if you're not paying attention or don't have a lot of movement speed, but as long as you give it the respect it deserves, the lasers are trivial to dodge. The Solus Wing's giant laser might have been problematic if it wasn't possible to outrun. Even if you have poor movement speed, there are rails littered around the arena to speed you along. After the first time the heat reactors threw me for a loop, it never happened again. I think Gearbox tried to design this fight like a puzzle that needed to be solved, or more disgracefully, a Destiny-styled raid boss with static mechanics that really does this boss a disservice. After unlocking all the skins, I really don't want to do this fight again. The Solus Wing is really boring. The Solus Heart is also a little more interesting with its light bullet hell mechanics, but I find that it's also way too easy once you understand to simply dodge his attacks on the platform and destroy the swarming projectiles he releases. Risk of Rain 2 has always been pretty bad with designing quote-unquote final bosses, either having them be far too easy or so poorly designed that they demand an amount of cheesing to reliably overcome. It's a shame that Gearbox wasn't really able to design fun boss fights this time around. And that further contributes to the problem that I don't believe players will be fighting these bosses very much after obtaining all the unlocks. When was the last time you wanted to fight the False Sun pre-loop? To this day, there are no guides on how to fight the False Sun except for one explaining how to cheese him between two pillars. Longtime players only run the False Sun, and now seemingly the Soulless Wing for the sake of completion runs, or if they want to be overpowered before fighting the Mithrix fight. Unlike the False Sun, the new alt path does grant a lot of items and benefits to the player, so there's at least that, but I don't think veteran players are going to appreciate being overpowered every time they do the path. It should be kept in mind too that some of what was marketed in the DLC's teaser videos are changes or additions to the base game. Like the revamped drone AI or being able to spawn in as a drone after dying in a multiplayer lobby, bug fixes and balance changes. There was a decent amount of stuff given for free to players that ultimately doesn't contribute to the value of the actual Alloyed Collective DLC. I guess Hopoo Games spoiled us too well with the Survivors of the Void DLC, which has so much content that I couldn't imagine the game without. In comparison, Seekers of the Storm and Alloyed Collective are basically shrinkflation in video game form. It's not that Alloyed Collective is bad, but that it's underwhelming. I firmly believe that it's being overrated by the player base because it's not a buggy mess like Seekers of the Storm was. In reality, I'd give this DLC a 6, maybe 7 out of 10 on a good day, because honestly, I'm not sure I want to see more DLCs released in this form. It'd be really cool to see Gearbox expand on existing survivors, or add maps that have more events on them, like the Elder Lemurian Cave on Abandoned Aqueduct. We got map variants for Bulwark's Ambry. Why couldn't that have been part of the new content route? Maybe the alternate path should have been locked behind the AWU, which would give players more of a reason to want to go to Siren's Call. We already have the functionality to go to the Lunar Bazaar and hope stages appear on the Lunar Seers. Generally, why aren't there more niche mechanics to stages such as the node on Verdant Falls that always spawns a large chest or a scrapper? Or how about on Aphelion Sanctuary where it has a higher chance to spawn the lunar cleansing pools? When I hoped for more content to come to the game, I was really hoping that it'd require more commitment from players. This disappointed me even with Voidling's release. I haven't visited Void Locust since the Survivors of the Void DLC came out, because you can skip it entirely via the Glass Frog on commencement. It's a way safer option than having to try and fail at Void Locust until you understand how that map works. So a huge part of the Allied Collective DLC being the new alt route that has these 3 new bosses and 3 new boss items isn't going to be touched by most players shortly into the future. I can't even imagine what a 4th DLC for this game would look like. Would it be the Imp expansion that Hopoo Games teased back in 2020? Is it going to be in line with Seekers of the Storm and Allied Collective where it just shoehorns a new alt route in that most players won't play long term? There's a serious scalability issue with how Gearbox is going about making these DLCs that, if not addressed, will just bloat the game with a lot of gimmicky, temporary stuff. And this is coming from someone who likes to experience as much of the game as I can. I frequently do looping runs and take down the Twisted Scavenger. Going through Void Fields is fun if my goal is just to become overpowered. I fight Voidling probably more than anyone should to the point where that boss really isn't that hard for me. But I gotta admit that there's also so much content that I don't touch. There's no incentive to go back to Bulwark's Ambry after unlocking all the artifacts. The same goes for Void Locust, the False Sun boss fight, and now seemingly the Soulless Heart route. So that's my thoughts on the DLC. I'm kinda already bored of it. The simple fact that the game was even updated at all is good. This patch has fixed a lot of bugs and minor annoyances I had with the game, but this particular patch has also introduced some new, interesting bugs that will hopefully be fixed. If they ever do a 4th DLC, I honestly just want to see more character skins, new character abilities, and new stages. I don't even want to see items. I think there's too many at this point. Again, the DLC isn't bad, it's just really not that good either. If you've got the $15 or you've already bought it, what's the harm? But I really hope these DLCs take a different direction in the future. Thanks for watching.